Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia City Council Chambers. This is a regularly scheduled Committee of the Whole Working Session meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. Today's date is Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. The time is 9 a.m. We have appearances to discuss relating to 4 items on the agenda. So we'll turn the portion of our agenda over to our City Administrator, Britt C. Bennis. Britt?
Thank you. Good morning. The first item on the agenda is St. Louis County and MnDOT regarding 4 items. The first one is US 53 and CASA 102, 9th Street North intersection control evaluation report.
Good morning, everyone, and if you just turn the microphone to green, and please state your name for the record, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Vic Lund. I'm the traffic engineer for St. Louis County, and I have some partners in something up here this morning from MnDOT. We're going to do 4 topics this morning, if you don't mind. First, we're going to walk through 2 intersection control evaluation reports that were completed last year. I'll stand up here with Jim as he does that. And then the county has 2 topics. First is the question of there's an orphan segment of 9th Street between US 53 and Hoover Road. And that was discovered during the ICE report process. And so we had to come up with a determination of who's going to be the owner of that orphan segment. Okay, so technically it's an old trunk highway segment from when trunk highway 135 used to go through there, but we have to reconcile that. The second thing for the county is this question of a potential swap between the county and the city. So we have county state aid mileage within Virginia. Obviously, Virginia as a state aid city has MSA, municipal state aid street mileage. And there's a consideration because of the 9th Street orphan, do we look at a swap between the county and the city? I'll talk about those things in a second. I'm going to hand it off to my partners from MnDOT.
Okay, thank you. Please state your name for the record and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Jim Miles. I'm the MnDOT District Traffic Engineer. So I'm going to talk about the first 2 topics. And so you may or may not be aware that MnDOT has a project this summer. I'm sure you're aware, but a paving project. When that project started, we took a look at a couple intersections and said we need to dive into these a little bit more. Unfortunately, our evaluation didn't line up with the project, so some of these recommendations won't be implemented with the. Well, these recommendations won't be implemented with the project. However, that was kind of the initiation. So the signal at CASA 102, Highway 53, 9th Street, that intersection, is currently past its 30-year life expectancy or life cycle. So part of that we want to look at, we did an intersection control evaluation, we'll call that an ICE report, to determine what is the best intersection analysis. Excuse me.
Mr. Mayor. Can you tell us which document you're referring to so we can look it up, please?
Sure, I'm sorry. I am referring to the ICE control evaluation 53 and 9th Street. Yep. So we do these evaluations because replacing a signal, if we just replace a signal, it's a 30-year fix, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing, not just blindly replacing a signal. So as part of that evaluation, we looked at several things, including operations, how efficiently that type of intersection moves traffic. We look at safety, how safe has the intersection been functioning, and then cost. And we look at the current configuration, and then we look at the future potential options. And in this case, we looked at roundabouts as an option, and we looked at signals as an option. And to further kind of compound the story at this location, the west leg of the intersection, County Road 102, the county has a desire to close it. So we looked at both options, and interestingly enough, as we went through the process, and I'm not going to go through the process, I'm going to kind of cut to the chase, and if you have questions, but we'll just get down to the final thing. Through the process, we decided that if the intersection was going to be a three-legged intersection, the signal still made the most sense in terms of the traffic control. If the intersection would remain a four-leg section, if the county road leg did not go away, then it made more sense to do a roundabout. Well, the county road is going away, so we are going to replace that four-legged signal with a three-legged signal. And I do want to point out that you'll have to dig in the report a little bit, but interestingly that the roundabout actually has the best safety operations and the best efficiency for that intersection. However, when you kind of tally in the cost, it makes most sense at this point to replace it with a signal. So in terms of the intersection of County Road 102, 9th Street, Highway 53, we will be replacing that signal in the future, and Alex will talk more about timing of projects, but we will be intending to replace that with a three-leg signal. The west leg of the intersection will go away. I guess any questions regarding the first topic?
Council? Any questions? Councilor Johnson?
Thank you. So it will basically look the same now, or will those side?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did overlook that in the report. Yes, the free rights, because of safety concerns, the free rights will go away, so it would be more of a traditional intersection where you will, on 53, you will drive up to the intersection and make a right, more similar to the other signalized intersections.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Any other questions from the council with respect to this topic? Item number 1 is the US 53 County State Aid Highway 102 9th Street Intersection Control Evaluation Report. Does anybody have any questions for the presenters today? Anything from staff? Okay, thank you. Mr. Lund?
And if I could, Mr. Mayor and the council, I just want to add one piece of information regarding the CASA 102 west leg at that intersection. Jim mentioned that the county's desire is to close that. I've just passed out 2 documents. The second one I'm going to go through with you in a second, but the first is a presentation that I gave to the city council for Mountain Iron back on August 7th of 2023. And it lays out the ICE report stuff, but specifically it talks about that closure of CASA 102 and the considerations for the county in doing that. And basically on this slide titled, What to Do with Old Highway 169 Parkville Road, it lays out kind of some high-level considerations of why we want to consider closing. And just quickly, why that consideration. First, mining expansion. St. Louis County, along with the city of Mountain Iron, engaged with MinTAC, and the information we received back from the general managers that they do have a desire to continue mining south towards Parkville Road, which leads to the second point of MinTAC purchasing properties, right? So we know that's coming down the line, which means I explained it this way. There's a shelf life of Parkville Road, which is the city segment, but then that connects to the CASA 102 segment. Secondly, the intersection of 53, going from a 4-legged to a 3-legged, makes it a safer intersection. So it gives an opportunity to improve safety. And then the county is leading a J-turn project to construct a J-turn at the intersection of 169 and Nichols Ave, CASA 109 by the L&M store in 2025. That intersection will be able to absorb the additional traffic that's diverted with the closure of 102. And then finally, there was the new CASA 102, which was constructed by MinTAC. Actually, MinTAC paid for it, but it's the new 102. Old 102 is actually in a mine pit now. New 102 is moved further south behind Walmart. So anyway, with that, the intention is that the county would close 102 in 2027. The one last thing I'll mention is the Mesaba Trail. So what's the question about the Mesaba Trail? Well, here's the deal. We knew that we couldn't close 102 without having to address the Mesaba Trail. Why? Because if we disconnected it, that is the only connection at that point between Mountain Iron and Virginia, which means it would sever the system. And so we were able to negotiate with the railroad to leave the Mesaba Trail in place for up to 5 years after the closure of 102. So the clock starts ticking in 2027 for the Mesaba Trail. We've already engaged over the last year with Mesaba Trail, Regional Railroad Authority. They're on their way towards planning a new route through the city of Virginia to then cross Highway 53 at some other location. So then they would be set up so that within 5 years of 2027 or by 2032, they would have the new Mesaba Trail constructed. Then that railroad crossing would be completely closed by that point, and we continue on our merry way. Alex.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Lund. Alex?
Mr. Mayor, Alex Parrott's project manager for MnDOT. And yeah, just a little bit more, Vic, still a little bit of my thunder there. But as far as programming, like Jim mentioned, we're doing the paving project this summer. This project is now slated for 2027 at the intersection itself on there. So that will be moving forward towards that construction timeframe. So that's, I think, all we had on that. So I'll let Jim maybe go back into item 2 here.
Okay, thank you. With that clarification, additional information, does anybody from the council or staff have any other questions regarding this item? First, Councilor Motley, and then over to Councilor Paulson. Councilor Motley.
Just a quick question, because I'm a huge fan of the Mesabi Trail. Is it, I know it's undetermined yet on route or whatever, but,
Yep.
and I know there's major costs involved with anything, but in the future with the Mesabi Trail, would there ever be a tunnel underneath Highway 53, like kind of by Mountain Iron where they put one underneath?
Alex.
Mr. Perez?
So Councilor Motley, the Mesaba Trail is looking at all options right now. If it's a bridge or a tunnel or some sort of grade separated crossing, they're not sure what that would be yet. Obviously, like you mentioned, money would be, one of the key factors in that, and also feasibility. Some of it comes into if you build a bridge or you're building it in the right spot. So that way you're not building a bridge and people are using something, a half mile down the road. So they're looking at all those options. I know I've talked to the trail, it was probably a couple months ago just to get an update on where they're at. And they're still reviewing options on what can be done. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Motley. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So the one question that I did have in consideration of the closure of Parkville Road or the 102, will this prohibit, have there been discussions about emergency vehicles and routes to get to those residents after that closure and prior to maybe Mintech purchasing property?
Yep, great question. The answer is yes. We've talked to emergency services both for Mountain Iron and Virginia. And what the feedback I received from those folks is that they actually prefer to use 169 to access the Parkville neighborhood today because of the time. It's actually faster. So I don't anticipate there being any negative issues with regards to emergency response.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. Thank you, Mr. Lund. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Next item, Mr. Miles.
All right, I'm back like a bad penny. So as part of that project that I mentioned earlier, that where we kicked off, we were looking at in the intersection of CASA 102 and 9th. We also wanted to look at 18th Street because that is an at-grade intersection. That's the access to the golf course. It's been MnDOT's experience through safety analysis that, our at-grade expressway intersections tend to be our highest crash. There are intersections that have the worst crash experience from a fatal and serious injury aspect, and we are a towards zero death agency, and we are looking at ways to improve the possibility or eliminate the possibility of fatal and serious injuries when we can. So with that, we undertook an intersection control evaluation report at the 18th Street intersection as well, and that is, Councilor Johnson, that's the Highway 53 and 18th Street ICE report. So again, very much the same as with the signalized intersection. We're looking at operations. How is this intersection currently operating? What kind of volumes of traffic does it carry? We're looking at safety, and we're looking at cost, and then risk. So I added risk in. Risk was also part of the first evaluation, but risk is a little more part of this ICE study than the previous one. The intersection itself does not carry a lot of traffic. If you look at page 7 of the report, you'll see how many vehicles leave and enter the golf course access during the peak times, and I think it's 15 vehicles at the peak hour are accessing that would be impacted by a change. So what we looked at was leaving it as is. We can just leave the intersection as is. A J-turn, which involves making U-turns in order to go one direction or another, or a complete median closure. And based on the volumes and looking at future safety, the recommendation is to close the median. It would become a right-in, right-out intersection at 18th. So you could, on northbound 53, you can access the golf course, but if you come out, you're going to have to go north or use the network of neighborhood roads to get back to Highway 53. Now, before we get too far, this is not part of any project. This is a recommendation. It's sitting out there. At this point, we don't have any plans to implement it, but should things happen, should we come up with a broader safety plan, this is what we are looking at doing at this location. Again, nothing at this very instant in time, but looking for a future safer road system, this is where we've settled upon.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to have some questions here. I'd like to start, and then we'll go to Councilor Johnson. My first question is, this is just for consideration, and a decision to move forward will come down the road, a couple of years down the road or whatever, or when would you think, what would be a reasonable time frame to consider that option?
Well, I may defer to Alex here, but I can tell you it's not included in the Summers project.
Right.
It would be, possibly if we haven't, the Summers project is going to last a while. Possibly the next project that comes through, or if we were to package a safety project in the future. But at this time, there's nothing, it's not included as any project.
Then my second question would be, it probably would be almost attached to the last question. So the concerns that we have as a council, or at least my concerns is the access to the golf course. You're going to limit the access to the golf from the south if you close that medium, number one. But the main concern is that we have a golf course and pro shop. We also have a full service restaurant that will be operating hopefully all year round. And so that limits some access coming from the north to get there. You'd have to take the back road of Highway 53 to come up to 18th Street North and shoot down 18th Street North to get to the clubhouse. That's a major concern for me as well. So that might interrupt and interfere and compromise the commerce that we have with respect to the retail part of the golf course operations themselves and the restaurant as well. So those are some concerns for us to consider moving forward before that final decision is made. I know this is just a concept and a recommendation, but I know these recommendations that come to before you usually come to fruition based upon the expertise that you have. So we look forward to more conversations about that. Alex, and then we'll go to Councilor Johnson.
Yep, and I can add on in there, like Jim said, we don't have this programmed in the project for this summer. We don't have this as part of the project in 27. So, when this will happen, who knows? Like Jim said, it might get programmed in a bigger safety project. We are going to be doing paving through there, and we are going to be on the east side there, the 18th Street paving around that corner to help try to get the bumps out of there, at least up to our right-of-way line. So that will be happening this summer, just as a point of clarity for that.
But that was my question about the humps that are in there. It's been a significant problem with damage to cars and things like this. That heaves up pretty much. We have an obligation as well. We have Jim Rosvet, our Public Works Director, involved in working in concert with you to try to make that smoother so it's easy to access and make it a palatable driveway through to both the clubhouse and to the cart barns and the parking areas themselves. So thank you for that, Alex.
And working with the city staff, just on that note, some of that bump is on our right-of-way, some of it's on the city right-of-way. So I know that we're working back and forth on making sure there's, both get corrected.
And I think we've had some internal conversations about that and are prepared to come up with some collaborative to get that accomplished. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor.
And then over to Councilor Beyondich.
That was one of my questions. Didn't we already authorize staff to work with MnDOT to do that culvert work?
Matt?
Morning. Yes, Councilor Johnson, we have plans already prepared. I've been working with Alex, and once they get their project bid, we'll be doing something to make sure we get the city's portion fixed up.
Perfect, thank you. I'm glad my memory's working this morning. The other question I have is with my memory, and this may be more for city staff, where is the new ATV that we agreed to help the ATV get the parking place underneath the power lines at? Whereabouts is that on that side? Is it the one farther up by P&8, or not, Komatsu? Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you. Jenny's giving me nods over here, so thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you. It's on the west side there up there. So thank you, Councilor Johnson. Councilor Beyondich.
When you talk about a J-turn, does the state bear the cost of all of that?
Yes, we would go by our cost participation policy, and I believe almost on a safety project like that, 100% would be covered by the state. Unless for some reason there were some improvements on the right in, right out that were necessary on the city leg.
In your report, there were 0 reported crashes over the analysis period. That's a 5-year period. And my concern is when we had the reworking in the Midway, it took away an entrance to Midway that was very crucial, not only to the residents, but to a business that was there. So I will be watching this closely on how it will affect what is happening in the area here. I know if we could redo, that entrance would be open into Midway for the ease of people trying to get to their homes and to the business that is located there. So thank you.
Understood, thank you. I just will add that part of the Towards Zero Death program is to be proactive in safety. All too often, our department has been on the tail end of things. Something has happened, and they said, why didn't you do something? So this is a more proactive approach to safety. We're not always waiting for something to happen. That said, this is a little bit lower priority right now because obviously the volumes are not there, so a big part of risk is the exposure. So thank you.
And thank you. I just want to follow up with Councilor Beyondich's concerns as well, and we've expressed his concerns over and over again to the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and in cognizant of the need to go towards zero deaths projects. But the closure of the Cuyuna Drive Highway 50 intersection has created a lot of angst amongst the residents and access in and out. And the J-turn that was constructed in order to allow access from the north into Midway without having to use the back road to Borgen Road and Highway 53. That's a J-turn off to the left. You make a U-turn to go back north on Highway 53, or you take left onto Vermilion Drive. So when those cars are taking a left onto Vermilion Drive, there's no stop sign there because there's no room to stop. So they're making a left turn and they're accelerating as they go to go across the intersection, and they're immediately entering across Midway Drive immediately and onto Vermilion Drive, which just creates some speed issues. And we've had nothing but a significant amount of concerns with respect to that, and it's difficult to mitigate that. Even though the speed isn't 30 miles an hour, it's still accelerated beyond 15 miles an hour. So it has created some controversy and some problems with respect to that. And I know we addressed that with Pat Houston, with Robert Agee, and with Mr. Johnson, and so what am I forgetting? Oh, and Mr. Dwayne Hill as well. So we are well aware of it, I'm sure. And so in concert with Councilor Beyondich, it's something for us to keep in mind as we move forward with some input from the city with respect to how that works. So, and we're cognizant of what we need to do, but we would like that conversation to go a little bit further, see if there's an alternative method or some other way that we can work something out. So that's down the road a little bit, so we'll look forward to that. Thank you, Mr. Miles, Mr. Lund, Mr. Perez. Anything else on this particular subject? Yes, yeah, Jim Rosvid, our Public Works Director. Jim, please come forward. Thank you.
Morning. I also want to make you aware that my department has been working on, we call it the driving range road, or it's actually 15th Avenue. We are working on brushing that, establishing some ditches. We do have a nice road bed there. I think we've got 24 foot of top on that road. So that will be another option for traffic. I think that road will really dry up and clean up. Where a person, if down the line we could add shoulders in there, we could blacktop it, whatever we wanted to. And that could also give the potential to funnel a lot of that traffic through there.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Jim, very much. Appreciate it. Okay, thank you. Any other questions with respect to this item on the agenda? None? Okay, next item, please. Britt?
They have more items to discuss with us.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lunt?
All right, next item is, I'm going to roll these two together. The first is the orphan segment, and then the second is that swap. They kind of are interrelated. So I passed out this smaller packet, 2 pages, front and back, if you want to turn there if you could. So on the first page, titled Orphan Segment of 9th Street, the red line represents that orphan segment, okay? So like I said earlier, I believe that was an old trunk highway that just never quite got reconciled to the current jurisdiction of the system. So the proposal then would be, you can kind of visualize this. If the west leg is obliterated or cut off, you'd end up with a T intersection, right? MnDOT, their right-of-way extends. You can see that change in the pavement color on 9th Street, right at Hoover. There's that line there. That's the line of where the orphan segment ends, and also for the right-of-way for trunk highway. So MnDOT would pay for 100% of the construction cost of that segment of 9th Street for the purposes of this project. Okay, so there would be no local cost participation. However, as part of the housekeeping, good housekeeping, we need to get that onto the books, onto a local system. So it's either going to be a city street or a county state aid highway. Of course, you can see Hoover Road there right off the bottom of the page. That's CSAH 7. Ends at 9th Street. Your MSA ends at Hoover Road. So we've had some discussion with city staff, some considerations that we threw out there. First, if it were county, I know that we learned that there's utilities, city-owned utilities within that orphan segment of 9th Street, which would require, if it's a county road, every time the city does work, you'd have to have a right-of-way permit from the county. If it's a city segment, it would go on to you could add it to your MSA mileage, which is what you generate revenue for your state aid street system. The length of that 9th Street segment is 0.11 miles. Maybe it's insignificant, maybe it's marginal, but certainly it could be added to your system for revenue generation. So with that consideration, no cost participation by the locals, the question of who, in terms of maintaining the utilities, thinking about right-of-way permits, thinking about generation of revenue, the fact that it's going to be fully reconstructed with the project in 2027, so likely there would be limited cost implications for the first 10 to 15 years of that street, right? The recommendation then from the county side and our consultation with the city staff is that the city would take that over as a state aid route. And then if I could just continue, then we can have questions at the end. The second and third page, then that question with this, when we had that conversation with the staff, was, well, would the county consider a swap between Hoover Road and Borgen Road? And I said, well, let's take a look at it. And so I poked around internally. I talked to some folks at the MnDOT State Aid Division, and it seems like it's feasible. So the second page, I should say, is CSAH 7.76 miles. So this is key. We have to think about it in terms of mileage, right? Because if we're swapping, we have to have some sort of a metric. And then Borgen Road on the third page is 1.74 miles in length, okay? And then on the last page, I put together this little simple table, and you can kind of see the breakdown then. So 0.76, 1.74, the difference is 0.98 miles. So then, if we were to swap it, and with the city taking over that segment, orphan segment of 9th Street, this would be the change in our respective systems. So the county would add 0.98 miles of county state aid highway within the city of Virginia, and the city would reduce its system by 0.87 miles. Okay? One thing I will mention is that cities tend to, and rightfully so, determine that to be a benefit for there to be county state aid mileage within their city. Why? Because it tends to get higher funding levels than a local county road, which uses property tax only, which means we have likely less investment into that road considered a state aid, where you actually get a little more revenue, a little more ability to invest, make it maybe more of a robust road serving maybe more modes or something like that. Anyway, the proposal then would be, and we're not asking for any action today from the council, but just I want to continue this conversation over the next couple months. City would take over 9th Street, the orphan segment, and then in terms of the swap, the mechanics of that, each fall there's something called the State Aid Screening Board that's hosted by the State Aid Division of MnDOT and representative counties across the state. So it's like our peers as counties, okay, so county engineers. So when a county X wants to make a change in its CASA system, we have to get an okay from our peers. Why? Because there's only so many CASA mileage out there that's delegated to all the different counties, and each county's kind of competing for it. That's kind of your revenue, right? It's kind of your job, in a sense, if that's where you get your money. So we have to make an argument to our peers, make a case. Our peers then would approve that, and likely this is not a controversial issue because St. Louis County has about 4 miles of banked CASA mileage. So we have 4 miles on the books that's currently not designated to a county road. What that means is it's just sitting there. It's not generating anything. We can actually put it on something. So this additional mile within Virginia, we would dip into that bank, and then we could reconcile that. So if we move forward, that would be October of this year. That would be approved, and then we would follow that up with an agreement between the county and the city, and that agreement would be the final, the document that actually makes the official transfer, and then we would work at the staff level to reconcile your mileage on the needs system. The needs system is a state aid database of all the roads, and then the county system, right? And then potentially that could actually occur maybe the beginning of 2025, as an example. And then last thing I'll mention is the question of resurfacing. There's implications. What happens with Morgan Road? So if I could just real quick, we threw together a quick cost estimate. Thank you to my resident engineer, Mr. Falstrom, in the back. And I know it's been on the city's consideration for some time of how do we resurface Morgan Road? Well, if it becomes a county road, what would that mean? Here's what I'll say. If it just gets transferred to the county, it'll get plugged into our pavement management system. At the ranking, it would be naturally compared to all other county roads. So it would just fall into that normal prioritization. It wouldn't be elevated artificially to the top. It would just simply be plugged in at wherever it would fit if it were already a county road, okay? One consideration that we thought up internally at the county was if there were to be again, this is just theoretical, it's just a consideration. We can wipe it off the desk, it doesn't matter. But what if there was city participation in that repaving project? So for example, the county could say, one idea, we would pay for 100% of everything except the driving lanes pavement. And so we came up with an estimate of that, like what would that scenario be? We would say that to reclaim the entire road plus adding paved shoulders, the county would do that. It's about a $900,000 project, okay? If the city were to say, okay, we want to elevate or prioritize or move it up the priority list, and the city participates, let's say, in just the driving lanes. I mean, there's different ways to do this, but let's just use this for an example. And for just paving the driveways, just the bituminous material only, for just 22 feet or 24 feet, would be between $380,000 and $400,000. So about half a little under half of that, right? So I mean, that might be a consideration for the city to think about, is if the county takes possession and you want to prioritize it, the county would pay for 100%. Maybe there's a cost contribution somehow, however that gets worked out between us and the city, and then we could actually get that done sooner than maybe later. And that particularly plays into, last thing I say, I promise, the Rock Ridge School Transportation Improvement Project. So all that stuff is happening in 2025 on the 53 system. There's going to be a reconstruction of Borgen out to White Cedar. And then this future project that I'm talking about would begin at White Cedar. Could that be accelerated to maybe 2026? We'll see. But with that, Mayor, I will turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Yeah, that was my question with respect to the project between Highway 53 and White Cedar Drive in conjunction with the school, with the city participation in that regard, what that cost would be. So I think the estimates that you're giving us with respect to the county roads for the reclaim, so what the city's participation could be as a result of the theoretical presentation you gave today, that would start from White Cedar Drive to Highway 135.
Correct.
That would be the estimate that you have with respect to the bituminous on the driving lanes.
Correct.
And thank you. And that number would be, once again, please?
380 to 400,000 for the blacktop, just for the driving lanes.
Thank you very much. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I would think that the swap would be beneficial in the wear and tear on our city vehicles. I know that our city vehicles, when they're plowing, already have to drive on Hoover Road, and they're just not plowing because it's not our road, as opposed to having those same vehicles driving, not only doing Midway, but then going up and doing Borgen Road. So I think from a long-term logistical standpoint, this is a really good idea for the city, and I think it'll save us a significant amount of money in all seasons, whether it's patching or whether it's the plowing and that. So I think this is a great idea. I appreciate all the time that your staff and our staff have put into having these conversations and looking more than 3 or 5 years ahead. I mean, this is truly a long-term solution to some ongoing challenges. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. And does this, because I'm not familiar with all this, I'm going to have to do some learning. Does this affect the homes on Borgen Road as far as taxes? Does the city still capture that? How does that work as far as the taxes for the residents on Borgen Road?
Mr. Lund.
Okay, I'll just say something and I'll turn back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Councilor, so with a county state aid highway, the county does not assess property owners adjacent to our property projects. So there'd be no assessment from the county side. If, for example, there were city participation, doesn't say there has to be, but if there were, that would be a city discussion of how would we fund, or how would you fund your share of that project. Okay, but from the county side, if it were 100% county funded sometime into the future, there'd be no assessments because the county doesn't assess.
Thank you for that.
And so I would have one more question about that, and I fully concur that this is going to be beneficial to all parties, particularly with respect to those individuals who use the Borgen Road as the only conduit between Highway 135 and 53, coming out of the Borgen for all the residents, and the school will be using that on a regular basis as well. They'll be using Borgen Road to access, even though they have a transportation plan elsewhere, but I think that's a good thing moving forward. But the question that I have is, once the bituminous work is done, say there's city participation, we spend the $400,000, we find a way to fund it, it's all done, the county takes over. So any future maintenance has to be done on that road, who bears that burden?
100% St. Louis County.
Thank you very much. I was hoping that would be your answer. And so it's an investment that we make. So thank you. I'm fully supportive of that moving forward. We'll have to have some more discussion about that as you progress down the road. But thank you, Mr. Lund. Is there any questions or comments from the City Council? Any other questions or comments from staff? Anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Lund?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Very exciting. Very exciting. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lund, Mr. Perez, Mr. Miles, Mr. Falstrom, back in the back. Thank you very much. And as well to Jim Rosford, our Public Works Director. So thanks again for your time. And so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Britt?
Thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda is review the facilities use agreement with the American Red Cross for the Iron Trail Motors Event Center.
Okay, thank you. I know similar cities have the same kind of agreement all over with different venues within their community. So look forward to some information from you, our Park Director, Brian Silva. Brian, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Council. Just a brief review for you on this. This is not the first time that this agreement has come before this council. Back in late 2021, early 2022, the American Red Cross also requested that we bring this agreement to the council for consideration. If I remember correct, and forgive me if I misquote individuals from this council, but just a brief recap. I believe at that time, Councilor Paulson had some concerns with some of the items that are in the agreement, the city's obligations as part of the agreement, and I believe Councilor Beyondich had concerns of what would we do if this agreement were put into place and we already had existing commitments to renters. So at that point, the council did not approve the agreement. The reason it's coming back to you today is the American Red Cross at this point is gearing up for what they believe may be a bad spring, bad summer here in northeast Minnesota with wildfires, and they're looking for potential places for shelters for if there were an incident to occur that they needed to relocate a large number of people. So you have the agreement in front of you. There are a lot of things in the agreement that I have some reservations with. We have, just to recap what we've done as far as the facility, as we were designing and building the facility, we did keep in mind utilizing the facility as a shelter, as an emergency shelter. We currently have three different agreements in place. One with Washington Manor, one with the nursing home across the street from us, and one with the school system. And we have utilized that. Here 2 years ago when Washington Manor needed to be evacuated, they came to our facility. I was not there for that. I was on vacation, but things went very well in a bad situation at that point. So we have utilized the facility here in town for evacuations. I guess I'm able or willing to answer any questions that you have about this agreement. If you were to ask my opinion, what I would feel more comfortable with, because I still share the same concerns that you had a couple years ago about this agreement, would be that we not close the door on the American Red Cross, but we let them know that we don't want to enter into a long-term agreement, but if they had the need for a temporary shelter, that we would look at doing a temporary agreement with them to provide the shelter based on our availability. Thank you.
I'll just make one comment. It's a great organization, provides emergency services. We need that in our community. We were responsible to ensure critical incident management of our people, evacuation of our personnel. This structure was made for that. I agree that if it's an emergency and the Red Cross needs to use it, we'll make the necessary arrangements to provide that, just like we did with Washington Manor. So I don't think we need a long-term agreement, but keep the door open. If there's an emergency, they need to come here, we will accommodate them or any other organizations that want to provide emergency services to our citizens. So that's all I have to say. Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess what I'd like to see is something put in place that could be signed in case of an emergency, a plan. I would think that if there was a need for the Red Cross to use our facility, there's probably not a whole lot of other recreational or other stuff going on around the area. I can't imagine them doing this unless it was a catastrophic something, major wildfire. Who knows what's going to happen this year? So I guess what I would like I said, I'd like to see is some sort of agreement so that we would know what their expectations are and we would be able to plan around that. And like you said, leave the door open for something. I don't like, it says review, and there's a lot of blanks to what are they paying for, what are we paying for, what do they have access to? And I suppose that's going to depend on what the emergency is. If I can't even remember the year, but it must have been about 89 or 90, there was a massive forest fire in Lake Vermilion area, and people needed to be evacuated. And I would think that we would do what we could to help facilitate those folks if they couldn't go local up there, if it got that big. So I would like to keep the door open. I would like to make sure we're discussing with them, but I too am not terribly comfortable with a long-term drop of a hat contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Councilor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Brian, for bringing that forward. And I do still share the same concerns as I did before. And I think entering into a long-term contract is not something that I would feel comfortable with, but knowing that we would never close the door, to anyone in need in that facility if it is available, as we had used it in the past for Washington Manor, I'm completely comfortable in that. But some of the language in here obligates our employees and expense of food borne by the city of Virginia, which AKA the taxpayers. And I'm not so sure that I'm comfortable bearing all of that language that's in the contract. So for me at this point, yes, leave the door open, but not necessarily enter into a formal agreement. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. Councilor Motley?
So let's just say we don't approve this agreement and the Red Cross comes stomping at our back door in 2 weeks. Can we throw together something at the discretion of the city of Virginia and offer it to the Red Cross at that time?
If you are giving administration and myself the authorization to do something like that, but I cannot see if the American Red Cross comes to us and administration reaches out saying the American Red Cross is coming begging for our help, I cannot see this council or this community turning their back on helping our neighbors. That's not who Virginia is.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you. Just to expand a little bit, the American Red Cross, under emergency services and disasters all across the United States, have similar agreements in place. Some don't have agreements, some do. But when it comes time in an emergency situation, these communities across the United States steps up to the plate, brings the Red Cross in there, and any other aid organization to a facility to help the citizens in the region. That's our job. That's what we've done. That's part of the reason why we have this committee. So that being aside, yeah, I think we could put something together, give the authority to staff which to accommodate that once a disaster is declared. We'll follow our critical incident operations standard, our critical incident policy that we have in place, and move forward with that. In addition to that, every citizen and business and the organization and company steps up to the plate in an emergency situation when there's a disaster and helps out the people in need. That's what citizens do. That's what companies do. That's what organizations do. And that's what they did when the Washington Manor was there. We had to evacuate there, and organizing that through whether it was the volunteer rescue squad, part of the St. Louis County, the health department came over. We had companies and citizens and organizations donating food, water, all kinds of things just on their own. And I don't anticipate that would be the case as well. So as far as bearing the cost of food or anything, that comes, from the community. And so by putting something together, I don't care if there's I should care, but if there's an agreement or not, depending upon what the agreement is, we'll provide them whatever needs based on the emergency circumstances, and we'll provide them the shelter, and we'll work out the logistics back then. We're not going to commit ourselves to an expenditure. I think that makes sense. But, Brian, anything else?
No, sir.
Are you asking for action with respect to this contract?
Just direction on what you would like us to do, but I think have already received that unless you want to make that direction formal.
Do we need that in the form of a motion, Britt? Just to continue to have staff work with the Red Cross on developing some kind of a emergency response plan for them to utilize the Ontario Emergency Event Center in case of a disaster. Councilor Paulson.
I was just going to move to receive and file, but I missed some discussion.
Okay, you want to, are you making a motion to receive and file?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, motion by Councilor Paulson to receive and file. Is there support? Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Motley. Further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. And the reason I'm voting no, and I say that, is because I think we have to keep the door open and allow staff to take a look at that moving forward. We're not voting on the thing itself, but we still have to keep the door open, continue the discussion. By receiving and filing this, that may close the door a little bit for discussion, and that's the only reason I'm voting no. Councilor, roll call, please.
Cuffey,
No.
Motley,
Yes.
Friedlieb,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Yondich, Johnson,
The motion to receive and file.
Baranzelli.
Motion passes 6-1. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Item number 3 is review the golf course letters of intent for lease of restaurant space.
I think I see we have 3 potentials. Thank you.
And the last time we did this, we ended up interviewing those that applied. So I guess the recommendation today would be if you, council's acceptable or amenable, we'll plan to interview the 3 that applied.
Interview the 3 that applied? Okay, very good. And so by taking this action to give the staff the authority to interview each of the 3 vendors that applied for the golf course restaurant lease, as far as that interview process, what would be the protocol for that? Who would be involved in the interview process?
The entire council.
Pardon?
The entire council.
Entire council. Okay, thank you. Councilor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. So if I remember correctly, the last time we went through this, I believe we had formed I don't know if it was a committee or just a task force. And the reason for that is so that whomever was coming forward with their different offers or their different letters of interest or intents, that those offers were kept private. And I don't know if that's something that we need to do going forward, like a small group of an interview committee. But I think it was
idea, because we just put the letters of interest in the packet. We didn't include everything they submitted
right.
because
and I
of
noticed
the
that,
intent.
and I'm sure it was for privacy reasons.
Correct.
But I feel like that's what I remember from last time we did, just to keep offers private. And so I think I would probably be comfortable going down that road, similar to we did last time. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Paulson. Looking for comments or questions or direction from the council. For me, we have 3 vendors. And so if we're going to interview 3 vendors, we interview those 3 vendors in whatever form we determined it to be. And then once those interviews are done and there's a recommendation to come before the council to consider that recommendation, at that point in time, we discuss that as well. If a vendor is selected, then the negotiation process begins for that vendor. Is that correct? And so during the negotiation process for that, is that public or private?
The negotiation aspect.
Very good. And so if the committee or whatever form we determine as to take a look at the 3 vendors, would that same committee also be part of the negotiations for the contract itself once a vendor is selected? It could be.
So, if I may, Mayor?
Please, Brian.
So, the process of actually going through and negotiating the contract, the city could, for limited purposes, meet in closed session to develop the positions and put a value on what that interest or that property right that it would be transferring to the vendor would be. And then through that, much like labor negotiations, through that process could give the committee some guidance on moving into the negotiations. Ultimately, a contract brought back, and the ultimate contract that would encompass the agreement would be a public document that would be approved finally by the council.
Okay, thank you. So it would be reasonable and prudent to take a look at a process that we've used on a number of occasions for other issues by potentially assigning or promoting 2 counselors to sit on that negotiating or that interview committee along with staff and legal counsel. Okay, thank you. Councilor Paulson?
Hey, Mayor, I do have a question regarding when availability of a new lease could begin. That could be answered.
Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. So we've heard back from the Northern Divides Council. We were interested to learn there was no substantive changes to the document other than the requested cash has been bumped up once again. My understanding, and I think I would defer to Mr. Siebler or to Ms. Sibenes, is that there is no active business occurring at the site right now. For all practical purposes, I understand they've removed a majority of their personal property. There's some cleaning and maybe 1 load worth of personal property yet to be removed. And so I think if we can get the possession recovered, the transition can happen fairly quickly. Negotiating the agreement to vacate is taking a little bit of time.
So I guess I would like to see that. It looks like the golf course season is going to open early this year unless there's a major snowstorm. And we have opened as early as the middle of April, between the middle of April and the 1st of May. So that's workable as far as the cleaning goes. I think we had some options on the table to make sure that that venue was prepared and available and ready for whoever we select to move in there to be opened and operating at least initially and ramping up their operation by the opening of the golf season. Councilor Paulson?
You asked my question. I just wanted to, I guess the reason I asked is I wanted to make sure we would be ready in preparation for the golf season. So thank you.
Thank you. And I might be, we'll go to Councilor Johnson first, and then I have a couple of comments maybe. Councilor Johnson.
I once again need to express my sincere frustration and at this point anger that we are still being held hostage in a building that should be ours. It is ours. Do we have keys yet even? No keys yet. And it's now March. Legal process or not, they've been storing their stuff rent-free in our building for 2, 3, 4 months. And I'm not looking for a response. I just really need to say that, the golf season is going to start early this year, no matter what. It's already warmer. And I guess my lack of words says it all. I just need to make sure that it's on record that we have to do better next time when it comes to our contracts, not only with whoever's at the golf course, but any of our city properties that we're leasing or borrowing or anything. This can't happen again. It's costing us a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. So we should establish a committee today so we can begin the interview process in earnest. Councilor Beyondich, and then over to Councilor Motley. Councilor Beyondich.
And I would happily be on that committee. We don't have keys to the building, so we physically have not had a walkthrough to see if the property that belonged to the city is still intact.
We've been in there, we just don't have our own keys yet.
Can I ask why?
They still have a lease because we haven't terminated yet.
Thank you.
Councilor Motley.
I just wanted to say I completely 100% agree with Councilor Johnson. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I know we're all frustrated, but let's put a committee together right now, work with staff to conduct these interviews of the 3 vendors, and then come back with a recommendation of a vendor so we can move forward with the negotiation process of a contract so it can be opened by the date of the golf course and have that contract in place and in earnest. So looking for two counselors to sit on the interview committee for, along with staff, whoever staff decides sits in on that, along with our city attorney, to select a vendor, recommendation to start a contract negotiation with that vendor that's recommended, and to have that open by the beginning of the golf season. So, Councilor Beyondich.
I will reiterate, I would be on that committee.
Councilor Johnson?
We'll make a motion to form the committee to interview and would also volunteer to be on that committee.
Okay, Councilor Johnson now has a motion on the floor to establish a committee to interview the three vendors that have applied for the golf course lease. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Paulson. Is there any further discussion in that regard? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, looking for a motion to appoint two counselors to sit in on the interview process with the golf course vendors who have applied, the three that have applied.
I'll make that motion.
Make a motion for?
Counselor Beyondich and Counselor Johnson, or does it have to be separate?
No, it can be both.
Okay, for both of them.
Can
Thank
it
you.
be? Did you have a concern, Sherry? We made the motion to form the committee. We're making a motion to appoint the people on that committee. Does that clarify things? Okay, thank you. So the motion on the floor is to appoint Counselor Beyondich and Counselor Johnson to be on the interview committee with staff to interview the three applicants for the vending service at the golf course restaurant lease agreement. Is there any further discussion? Or are there any other nominations for that position, interview committee? Are there any other nominations for the interview committee? Are there any other nominations for the interview committee? The motion stands in support of Counselor Johnson and Counselor Beyondich to serve on that committee. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Paulson.
I'll support that motion.
Counselor Paulson supports. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. And we'll schedule something as in earnest. So thank you. Next item, please.
Item number 4 is the Joint Powers Agreement for the Minnesota Task Force 2 Urban Search and Rescue Team.
And we have Assistant Chief Jonason here to give us some additional information about that USART team, the Urban Search and Rescue Team. Good morning, Assistant Chief Jonason.
Morning, Mayor, councilors. I got yesterday, last night, emailed. City of Duluth did ratify and sign the Joint Powers Agreement. I do have a signed copy. I wasn't able to get it printed off in time for this morning, but as far as Duluth goes, it's signed. They're okay with it. This is a little bit different than the MOU between us, the 148th, and Duluth. The Joint Powers Agreement is just between the City of Virginia and the City of Duluth. The 148th will be a sponsoring agency, meaning that they're not part of the Joint Powers Agreement, but they will sign a separate document agreeing that they will provide personnel and house equipment as needed. But as far as the Board of Representatives, they will have representation, but the bulk of it will come from the City of Virginia and City of Duluth with one ad hoc.
Okay, so the Joint Powers Agreement between the Minnesota Task Force 2 Urban Search and Rescue Team is between, and that consists of Duluth at the City of Virginia. Any response to that is reimbursable. And then the 148th has agreed to provide in-kind services and personnel to help augment your needs with respect to your response.
Correct. There'll be a sponsoring agency. In the agreement, it does lay out that funding does come from the state of Minnesota. Reimbursements come from the state of Minnesota. This was at the request of the state to have a more formal agreement than our memorandum of understanding. And hopefully, well, not hopefully, once we do get the JPA signed, that will unlock the $900,000 that was approved through the FSAC board to be released to Minnesota Task Force 2 for the purchase of vehicles and other specialty equipment.
And I think this agreement, which is more formal, cements the responsibility and the commitment by the state to provide funding for that and reimbursement. So that makes sense. So you've signed it. The city of Duluth signed it. The 448th is committed to augment that based on your need. And so do you need action from us with respect to that? We've already approved it, have we not? We have not. Okay, so we need to approve it? Okay, thank you, Pam, for that clarification. So if anybody, before we ask for a motion, anybody have any questions or comments? Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I see that the governing will be 2 directors representing the city of Virginia. Are those appointments by the council?
Those appointments, if the council wants to make those appointments, that's fine. If they want to defer to the fire chief to make those appointments, I believe that's what the city of Duluth is doing, is they're just deferring to their fire chief to appoint 2 representatives, whoever he feels necessary, but that would be up to the council to decide if they want to make those appointments or.
And the reason I'm asking, because I feel pretty strongly that you should be on that board personally with all of your work, or are you going to?
I will defer my appointment since I'm actively involved as a task force leader.
Okay. Well, and I
generally appointments will be someone who's not directly involved with the per se boots on the ground operations. This is more of an oversight. Once a year they'll meet, they go through the books, all of our receipts, account for the purchasing. It's more of just an oversight board.
Okay, so it wouldn't necessarily have to be a firefighter, or it could be a community volunteer who has expertise in EMS, or it could be just about anybody. I mean,
I believe so. I'll defer to the city's attorney on that one.
Okay, well, we'll ask for an opinion from the city attorney, but I have some very strong feelings on who should be sitting on there, as Councilor Johnson alluded to earlier. Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. So as it relates to city selection, I mean, there's a number of different ways that we could do it. One of the ways is we could allow the chief to make the selections and then have the council confirm those selections. That's a fairly common process. And then it promotes communication, and the council has some input, but by and large defers to the judgment of the chief.
and I appreciate that clarification. I just want to make sure we all know which direction we're heading and who has that responsibility moving forward, knowing that, you know, the council could change at any minute. And so I just want to make sure that we have communication from you as the person who's led this charge from day one and worked very hard on it to make sure of the sustainability and the long-term viability of Minnesota's task force too. So thank you. Appreciate
that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have options, but what do you want to do? I mean, unless we don't make a motion to go one way or the other, because it's the USAR task force, you have members on the USAR task force. You have expertise in that regard. They know that process. They know how it moves forward. They know the operationals. They know the critical incident management responsibilities. It only makes sense to have members of the city of Virginia's fire EMS, who's on the USAR task force, to be able to continue to participate in, and you have a leadership role, but in the other role is the operations who knows and have hands-on experience of that. Putting somebody from a civilian perspective, from my view, regardless of their expertise, they're not part of this forum. They don't see this every day. They don't participate in every day. And most of these task force people, it's an internal selection based upon training experience and knowledge base. And I think that Councilor Johnson is alluding to that. He wants to make sure we have professionals serving on that in a manner. And I think, so I would agree with that in 100%. So do we need a motion to allow or to give the chief and the assistant chief the authority to appoint who they need to do on the task force? Pam, did you have a question? Right, that will be moving forward. I was looking for some additional discussion first. Well, let's go ahead. Thank you, Pam. I think that's more protocol. Looking for a motion to enter into the signed agreement between the city of Duluth and the city of Virginia with respect to the UR task force agreement.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Councilor Motley to approve the contract. Is there support? Support. Support by Councilor Friedlieb. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Johnson?
Oh, Mayor.
None? Okay, all those in favor? Councilor Motley?
I just wanted to say thank you for all you and your department do. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. So do we have another motion, Councilor Johnson? Did you have
I would
some?
move to authorize the chief and deputy chief to make recommendations to the council for appointment to this board.
Okay, thank you. That motion by Councilor Johnson to allow the fire department EMS to make recommendations as to appoint 2 members of task force to serve in that capacity and make recommendations to those 2 people back to the council. Is there support?
Support for discussion.
By Councilor Beyondich. Further discussion? Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. Thank you for all your team does.
You're welcome.
We very much in the city of Virginia appreciate everything you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess if it wasn't for the Virginia Fire Department EMS and the quality people that we have working for us, who started from the ground up, putting this your Urban Search and Rescue Task Force team together and started this in Virginia and expanded this to a regional relevant response force. So give you guys all the kudos for that.
I will. Thank you.
Moved and supported. Further discussion. Brian.
Mayor, if I may just briefly.
Please.
Perhaps an approach to take, as I understand the motion, maybe an approach to take would be to amend that motion slightly to direct the staff to reduce this to a city policy to bring back so that we have a consistent procedure for making these selections and confirmations, and that it's followed through and we can refer back to our policy at any given point.
I would amend my motion to direct staff to create a policy for future appointments as well.
Thank you. That's the motion, the amended motion by Councilor Johnson. Is the second to the amended motion as well? Thank you, Councilor Beyondich. Did you get that amendment on the motion, Pam? Thank you. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is review and approve the materials collection policy for the Virginia Public Library.
We have Jody Grabanowski, our Library Director. Good morning, Jody. Welcome.
Good morning.
Anything you'd like to present or add? I think it's pretty self-explanatory from my perspective.
So this policy, we've been doing this. We just wanted to get it in written format. We've been slowly working through all of our policies, so we did meet with our commission. And then it has to go to you, and once it's approved here, we'll make it pretty, put our logo and all that stuff on it, and then put it to our website. But if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the meeting where this was discussed, and there were some very good questions, and it was very well vetted by the Library Commission, very thoughtfully done. So I will make a motion to approve the policy as presented.
A move by Councilor Johnson. Is there support? Support by Councilor Freely. Further discussion. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering is there a need that arose that created this document to be procured?
We went through all of our documents and have been updating them, and so we have a document that hadn't been updated since like 1995 with a few additions in the early 2000s, and every library should have this kind of policy. So it was in there, but it wasn't fully vetted. So we took out the parts because we order materials all the time, and so we wanted to make sure that we were doing what we said we were doing. So it's more of just getting everything updated. We've been doing this since I started. We have a couple more policies to go through, but we started with the big ones like circulation. We went fine-free, and then worked more on the collection policy after we hired Sophia. And so now it's just taking time to get everybody in the right place to get everything approved.
Thank you for that. And I guess I just have one question regarding the intellectual freedom portion. The last paragraph, it says, responsibility for children's use of library materials rests fully with their parents or legal guardians. Selection of materials for adults will not be inhibited by the possibility that such materials may be accessible to children. And I'm concerned about that paragraph in that statement. If there is a minor child using the library and accessing materials without a legal guardian, how does that work, and why would that language need to be enacted in there?
Jody?
Okay, so we do not have we have a separate children's room, kind of, but you can go anywhere in the library. So that is in there just to let parents know that, hey, you are responsible for what your kids check out. You get to control that. We can't see what they pull out. And we just check out stuff all the time to people. So, and then also because parents have various different children's cards. And so just reminding them that they're responsible for what there's on their kids' cards. And so if they have a teenager who's checking out young adult books, great. But then don't get upset if the teenager loses their card and they're with their younger brother who has their card. So it's just more of just to make sure that parents understand they're responsible. We have all sorts of material in the library, and we just want to make sure that parents know that, hey, make sure your kids are checking out what you want them to check out.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Councilor Paulson. Has been moved, has it been supported? Moved and supported to approve the materials collection policy for the Virginia Public Library. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Motley.
I had the pleasure of being with my aunt, who is a frequent flyer at your facility, and just want to say thank you for all you're doing, because she loves that place. So thank you again.
Did she share with you her documentation?
She did not, but she shared with me something she'd like you to get. But
oh, that too. So we have a patron on our, just an FYI, so if you check out stuff at the library, it tells you how much money you saved. And so we had a patron that collected it throughout the year, and she saved over $5,300 by using the public library. And she had I think it was 65 plus visits to Virginia Public Library and 11 bookmobile visits. So, and this year she's collecting her data in a different way to share with me at the end of the year. So, but that was awesome just to know that she what she checks out. And yes, she gives us suggestions all the time. This also helps with suggestions okay, does it fit within our policy? Because we get some stuff that doesn't fit within our policy. So it gives us oh, nope, that doesn't work within our policy. Or, oh, hey, there's 27 libraries in the system. This library has it, so we will get it for you.
Okay, it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jody. Britt, before we go into the last two items, do I need to bring up the emergency travel request for me to go to St. Paul? Yeah, we didn't have a copy. Pam does it, but I got a call yesterday from Paul Pelletier from Rams and from Senator Rest, the Senate Committee on Taxes on EMS, and there's testimony that's going to be given tomorrow at 8:30 at the Senate hearing room, and they're asking 5 representatives to testify in EMS at this Senate hearing. They've asked me to testify tomorrow. And so I put the travel request together to get permission from the council to be able to attend that for testimony. I will be going down this afternoon, meeting with our lobbyists and some of the legislators and other EMS task force people prior to get our testimony together, the 5 testimonies. So I'll be testifying on rural EMS, Virginia EMS, and the effects and costs it has associated with that, and as a representative of the Range Association of Municipalities and Schools, representing the rural environment and how that affects the way we respond to rural ambulances who are unable to do so. So that's the goal and objective of the testimony. So I guess looking for, and you don't have it before you, if you prefer to have it, we can certainly provide it to you, but Pam?
Sorry, Mayor, I've been busy with an election.
I'm sure.
So I can email that out right after the meeting.
And then I
for
would be
review.
looking for permission to just go to the cities and to testify at tomorrow's hearing. So,
I'll move to approve.
thank you. Councilor Paulson moves to approve. Is there support? Support by Councilor Freelieb. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you. I think for the general public's edification, I think for all the expenses, minus meals, minus that, it would be about $300 and some dollars to go to that. 400 some about. Thank you. Okay. Okay, next item.
The next item was potential litigation, and this portion of the meeting may be closed as per Minnesota Statute 13D05 Subdivision 1. Attorney-client privilege, and right behind that is the contract negotiation update with AFSCME, which also is closed as per Minnesota Statute 13D05 Subdivision 3.
So the motion is to close for both. Councilor Johnson.
I just would like to remind people that it is primary day today, and that all the precincts in Virginia do vote at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center until 8 p.m. tonight.
And a reminder, it's just the presidential primary only. The presidential primary only. So thank you for that, Councilor Johnson. Okay. All right. Was there a motion? Close? By Councilor Beyondich to close. Is there support? By Councilor Motley. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. The meeting is now closed. Let's take 5 minutes, take a quick break, and then we'll begin. Thank you. Okay, we're recessing the council meeting to go into closed session, and then upon completion of the closed session, we will convene the council meeting, our committee whole meeting, and then continue with our business. So just a clarification of the public. Thank you.